Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Detour Live, and we are live for the first time in a couple of episodes. And being live has its limitations, and of course, Johnny Trevorrow has not technical difficulties; he's stuck in traffic. So we've brought our guest straight in, and it's Nathan Haas. Now, Nathan, you've been in the World Tour. I checked the records. This is your 10th year in the World Tour, and we're going to go through your career. But first of all, mate, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm back on Earth. I was just knocked around pretty heavy with a bout of pneumonia and COVID at the same time. So I'm fortunately back on Earth, but it took a while to come around.
So take us through. I've read an article on Cycling News. You were at Torino and you started feeling a bit crook, and you knew something wasn't right. You know what actually happened?
Honestly, man, it's as simple as that. I just woke up one morning feeling just really spacey. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just didn't really feel like my body was my own that day. But 3 days prior, my teammate had that I was rooming with had just sort of come down with bronchitis, and it always feels like at a bike race, you know, if your roommate gets sick, you're like, okay, right, start the clock. I've got 3 or 4 days before I'm done as well. So I started coughing that day, and I thought it was bronchitis. And eventually it actually was pneumonia, which was super lame. But somewhere along the course or the track or whatever, how it goes, I also caught COVID at the same time. So I sort of got a double whammy, left hook, right hook, and it put me down.
And does it? I mean, we've had a few riders on this show before. I don't think anyone's had COVID. I think Bewley tested positive for COVID, but he had like no symptoms. I think 1 or 2 days he felt a bit rough last year. But it's weird how there's different levels. Like Simon Yates had it and said, no, he didn't really feel much effects at all. But in your case, you got hit hard. Like, how bad was it at a certain point there?
Yeah, I mean, it's super strange, isn't it? Because, you know, I've had teammates that I've actually been at a race where it comes back positive, and the day before on the bike they were absolutely flying, and they sort of look around like, guys, I'm really sorry. Like, if I felt anything, I would have told you. But then there's other riders that that I know, you know, had the sort of really heavy fever symptoms, and then had to have weeks off the bike. So it's really a strange virus, and I feel like, you know, everyone's become such experts about it in the last year and a half, which is something I never thought I'd know much about. But I think it comes down to sort of where your global health position is at the time. You know, I think you know, in that early spring, I'd done a fair bit of racing already. I crashed a couple of times at Strada Bianca, you know, the days before. So, you know, maybe my immune system was just, you know, you think because you're young and you're a professional athlete, you're super healthy. But really, when it comes down to it, our immune system's sort of on a knife's edge most of the season. And I think when Buell's got it, actually, it was actually during the quarantine. So he'd just been chilling in the house for a while. So, you know, one bonus of that was he hadn't been you know, emptying himself on the bike every day. So maybe that was his advantage, or maybe I've just got a pretty weak immune system. But yeah.
I saw in that article that you mentioned there was one specific moment where you just couldn't get the air in properly, and you were sort of like 10 minutes off calling an embo. Like, you're thinking, well, you know, this is actually getting quite serious.
Yeah. I was, you know, when you've got 10 pillows behind your back to try to sleep sitting upright, because lying down was impossible. Yeah, there was one point where I said to myself, you know, in 10 minutes, mate, if this is as bad as it is now or worse, then you got to get to hospital, because this isn't right. And you know, sort of fortunately, I got through that night, and that was the absolute worst of it. And it was only one night where it felt actually kind of, you know, I won't say it felt scary, but like, you know, you had the concern where you're actually thinking like, well, maybe you're not on top of this. But yeah, you know, I'm 32, and that was where I was at. So I changed my mind pretty quick about the virus to be honest. Before that,
Yeah.
I've just known so many people who had it and cruised through it, and I just thought, oof, this is not a Mickey Mouse thing. Would never have said that about older people or anything, but for a 32-year-old professional athlete that I assume I'm quite healthy, to be hit as hard as I was, it's definitely changes your mind about the whole thing, and it makes definitely makes me see when I've got friends traveling. I said, man, make sure you take the good mask.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, even countries like Australia, I mean, the biggest worry is complacency. Like, when we're really lucky that we're like an island, but geez, this thing could easily spike up again if people aren't taking the right precautions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on one side, the complacency in Australia really just comes down to the confinement policy for income travelers, because it doesn't come out of thin air. We've already seen unfortunately too many times slipping through the cracks in Australia, and maybe this will be an unpopular opinion for a lot of the listeners because they're all in Australia tuning in, but when I see people complaining that their state's gone into another 5-day lockdown for contract tracing and all of this, is to make sure that they sort of stay on top of any new little pop-ups of the virus. I just think to myself, like, man, I wish we could have a 5-day period where we just chill out and then there's nothing to worry about again for another 6 months.
Yeah.
When you've been living in the thick of it for going on over a year and a half now, it's just really fatiguing.
Well, you were back racing on Wednesday. Was it Brant's Appeal that you came back, and how did that feel to be back on the bike at a race?
Oh, to be honest, it felt great to be back on the kind of team bubble, so to speak. I've just been spending, once you spend so many weeks in bed and then able to do like an hour or two by yourself for most of your training. I got a few longer rides in before heading to the race, but I think the team knows my sort of headspace pretty well, and they know that I like being around the team and guys, and find it quite motivating to be around the environment. So it was good sort of just to pop in for one race and just to test where the body was, because sometimes when you're coming back into training, it just feels so impossible to really push yourself to your max. You always have that sort of intuition that, maybe pushing today's still too early, like it feels wrong. And then inevitably, because your head's questioning it, you just feel bad. And then you don't really know when you can step into proper training again. So going to a race and having zero pressure from the team at the race, they literally just said, Nathan, if you make it 20 Ks in, that's great. If you make it to the end, that's great. We just want to see exactly where you are and at least get your head back into the game.
Yeah.
And I was actually super surprised how good I was. And then all of a sudden, just at 130 Ks into the race, like the endurance just fell just directly out from under me, and that was done. So I went to the bus, but before that, the nice feeling was that my breathing was good. I actually felt explosive. Like I didn't feel like I was chasing the Peloton all day. So at least now we know that I can jump fully back into real training and start a proper build up now. So it was, to be honest, it was awesome to be back, even though it was a DNF and a shitty result. It was great to be back.
And how does this shift your season now? Like, obviously, you would have had high hopes with the Ardennes. I mean, does it mean that you'll still be able to do them, but just not in sort of a leadership role, or what's the plan now?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's always hard when you miss your goal races, not for any other reason, but they're just the ones that you tend to love. Your favorite races tend to be the ones that you do the best at. If you ask Yates brothers, they're probably going to say the Grand Tours are their favorite races, and that's what they're the best at. And if you ask Matt Heyman, he's going to talk about the Cobb Classics because they're the ones he's best at. So you kind of you lose two opportunities anytime you're not in form for your goal races, which is one, having a lot of fun because you do love it. But second of all, it tends to be what you were signed on the team to do to get results at that kind of racing. So it's, it is a bit frustrating on many fronts. But at the same time, I really hate being at my favorite races and being shit. I'd actually prefer to be at home training for a goal than just to turn up and know that I can be really good here, but I just don't have it in me right now. So fortunately the team's been really cool and calm and just said, Nathan, go home for 3 weeks, go build, and come back into the kind of fold when you're ready, and we'll reassess what goals we can kind of come up with at this point.
Now, Johnny Trevorrow finally joins us. How are you, John?
I'm going well, Daniel. Nathan, how are you, mate?
Now you've jumped in and you've blocked his internet. I don't know
well, there you go.
Can you hear us, Hussey?
Hi, Nathan.
Oh, no.
I can, man. Hey, John, how are you, bro?
I'm going well, mate. Jeez. Yeah, better than you, I think. Although you're obviously going okay because you did line up a couple of days ago. So I've missed everything.
Yeah,
so
we've covered all the COVID stuff. So
okay,
now, it's all done. We're talking about the team's being very supportive in Nathan's first race back. So we can keep moving forward on the run sheet. Johnny, can you catch up where you think we're at?
Yeah, I've just pulled up. I actually had a lunch meeting with an old mate of yours, Nathan, Ronnie Reed. And Ron remembered very well your first Sun Tour.
What's he up to?
Yeah, you're really, really good. He's retired now, but he's just written a fantastic book, which we're talking about that. But yeah, he finally remembers that first Sun Tour when he did the big interview with you and predicted you might win it, and you proved him right. So there you go.
Well, maybe I wish he would make a few more predictions like that for me to prove right.
Oh, there you go. There you are. Yep.
That's the first one.
Oh,
yeah.
I've got an even better picture. Look at that one.
Yeah. Oh God.
Is that you and Steele? I think it was you and Steele.
Already in a hazmat suit.
Hey, Hussey, I might have to call it. Do you want to try re-logging on your laptop and try the link there, because we're just having a few internet dramas trying to get the connection right, and then I reckon that might fix it. So if you rejoin the program with that link, then we'll get you back on your lappy, and that should make a difference with the show. I'll just pass time with Johnny.
Cool.
All right, mate. So, Johnny, just to fill you in, yeah, it was obviously a pretty full-on experience for Hussey with the COVID. The thing I took out of that Cycling News article was just at one point there, I was 10 minutes away from calling the ambulance, because it felt like, someone was standing on his chest and just sucking the air. And then we talked about, obviously, with Simon Yates and how it didn't affect certain riders. But I suppose it begs the question, you're in the middle of the pandemic, you're still doing these races, but it still gets through. Like, it doesn't matter what sort of policies you have.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I've just had an hour and a half in the car, and the whole conversation has been on, the AstraZeneca vaccine, whether you should have it, whether not, and all of the incidents. And here we are in a country that's virtually, we haven't got any issues. You can just imagine what it's like over in Europe, where they're countries going back into lockdown, and I see Japan just going into their fourth wave. So it's pretty horrific, really.
Yeah. Now, one thing we'll talk about with Nathan when he gets back is it's contract year for him, and there seems to be a big trend with teams, this obsession now with the best young riders. And is there a spot, or should there be a balance between young talent and older talent to mentor them and bring them through? Because it should be an important role, Johnny. Those older heads on any of the World Tour teams.
Oh, of course. I think people are just, knee-jerk reaction on a lot of that sort of stuff at the moment because they're realising that their big contracts have been with the experienced guys. And now suddenly, there's these youngsters getting offered these amazing deals. But that really has to be tempered with experience. They haven't got it, You look at some of the youngsters who are just signing up. They need that experience. Okay, they're good at the pointy end, but they can't just rely on great sports directors to look after them. They need experienced guys in the peloton with them.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other things was he messaged he put out a tweet, and that was about Jakobsen returning to the peloton, after such a long layoff and how inspiring that was. Now, one thing that people probably don't realize is how much a crash like that rocks the peloton in terms of, the safety and particularly in the moment when there was people obviously attending him and not knowing the extent of his injuries. I mean, it must be a traumatic thing for riders to witness, particularly firsthand.
Look, it's traumatic for everyone, not just the guy who has the accident, as you say. And it was great to see him back in the Tour of Turkey, which, we noticed that Cav's managed to get 3 wins in a row. Pretty amazing for someone who hadn't won in a couple of years. And the nice part was that there was that big crash on the stage, not for last, where in the last 200 metres, bike riders went down everywhere. And he stopped to check on one of the guys who was seen to be the worst hurt in the accident and talked with him. So, yeah, it was pretty special.
And also the UCI, I think that another good point is just how hysterical people are since the pandemic in terms of reaction to everything. Everything becomes a lot more heated, particularly on social media. And the latest one about the Biddens, I mean, it's really blown up. What's your take on it, Johnny?
Oh, well, look, there's no doubt they've got some issues with rubbish being outside those areas. And if it's throwing rubbish, fair enough, but when you're throwing a bin to the kids, it's just ridiculous. I mean, another guy's been fined because he accidentally dropped the wrapping paper from his from his bar. He was about to have it. He dropped it. He didn't throw it away. It fell. The vision's there of it actually slipping away, but he got fined just the same. So they're going over the top. I see the other thing that's popped up last night. They disqualified 2 different guys, 2 different races for the slipstream position. For the aero position that you get where they lean on their bars. Yep, 2 guys got rubbed out 2 different races. So they're jumping onto everything.
Now we've got Hussey. Can you hear us, Nathan? We've got the audio, but we just don't have the video. But if we get the audio, I mean, this is predominantly a podcast, so we can still upload the audio version of it. Can you hear us, mate? No? I don't know what you've done, Johnny, but ever since you jumped in,
of course it would be my fault. Of course.
All right. Well, let's go through the sponsors stuff now, and then hopefully the technical stuff can get sorted. Kick things off with Let's Go Motorhomes, mate.
Yes. Let's Go Motorhomes. Why not holiday in Australia's best motorhomes and campers? I love helping people have incredible holidays. One of Australia's leading motorhome and camper van rental companies. They've got vehicles to suit all types of travellers for all kinds of adventures, and you can be sure that they'll go the extra mile to make your road trip the best time ever. We'll have to ask Nathan when he comes back on where he would go with his Let's Go motorhome. But the thing is about Let's Go, they plan the whole trip for you. I mean, if you just say roughly a direction you've got to go, they'll come up with all the best camps, free site camps or caravan parks to come and stay in and help you plan your whole trip. So wonderful people. So give Andrew a call, Let's Go Motorhome, and he'll look after you.
And Jayco Caravans, Johnny.
Well, Jayco Caravans, I mean, isn't it funny that all the Let's Go motorhomes are Jayco? There you go.
Amazing coincidence, mate.
Amazing. But, we know that caravanning has just taken off. It's one of the real strong things that's come out of this pandemic. And Jayco has something like 10,000 back orders. But if you wanted to buy a caravan, you would go to a Jayco. But if you're going to buy a caravan and you're interested in cycling, well, where else would you go? We've got dealers all around Australia and the best range of caravans to select from. So jump on there onto jayco.com.au and have a look at their wonderful range.
And talking about best range, Mitchelton Wines, what a range.
Well, there is a range. There's a range just behind them. The Strathbogie Mountains in the background. Fantastic cycling around there. We used to have a regular Green Edge ride starting from Mitchelton and up into the Strathbogies. But it's one of Australia's favourite wineries and a place of escape. Experience the history, the beauty and the serenity of the Goulburn Valley at your own pace. Look out over the vineyards from the iconic tower, staying at the new hotel, relaxing by the pool, recharging in the day spa, exploring the seasonal menu at the Muse, or stopping by the Providore and touring their fantastic cellars and tasting their signature wines. You can recharge by the day and relax by night in the fantastic spa, and where you can quiet the mind, unwind the body, and rediscover your balance in a setting of peace and harmony. Mitchelton has become, as you can see there, known as an amazing venue for weddings and that special function. So it offers unique spaces. You can get married out in the open. We've got a wonderful area there right by the Goulburn River, or you can go inside underneath the amazing tower. And of course, if you go right down into the bowels of the building, there it is, the amazing Aboriginal art exhibition. It's the largest private Aboriginal art collection in the world, and just staggering. And there it is, the old $10,000 Land Cruiser with the €3.9 million paint job.
Geez, it bounces around like Bitcoin, that one. It was about 5.5 million the other day. Now, Hussey, can you hear us now? Are you back online?
Yes, we're back on track.
All right, awesome.
Good.
Now, we're just going to go to a quick ad from our great mates at Bike Exchange, and when we get back, we'll continue the chat, and we'll go back over your career as well. So stay tuned for that.
Look at this bike. You think it's just a bike, right? But it's not. It's a bike 374 people are looking at. This guy, this girl, them, all looking at it. People from here, there, and wherever this is. People that are looking for a bike. Or just a piece of it. Amateurs, semi-amateurs, and pro-amateurs. This guy wants this bike, but with this crank and these bars. This could be the perfect match, but not this one. This girl has a bike to sell, and thousands of people might purchase it. Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. His, hers, yours. The latest data and insights help those businesses keep moving. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, with over 500,000 products and 900 brands, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
All right, before we get back into it, we've had a couple of comments. Of course, Wendy Superfan, hi, Dan and John. Hi, Nathan. G'day, Wendy. Michelle Hoos says, 3 lovely blokes on one small screen. And then we've got Ryan Kavanagh says, love the show, boys, listening from Ireland, having breakfast. To be sure. Great stuff, Ryan. Now, Hussey, we were just saying it's obviously contract year for yourself. Are you finding that there's a big trend now on the back of the results last year that teams are obsessed with the next best young talent? But obviously there has to be a balance between the young talent and guys with a bit of experience to teach these younger guys the way. I mean, how does it sit with you at the moment with where the sport's at from that perspective?
Yeah, I'm really trying to sell myself as the next best old talent.
Perfect. We're not that old, really. I mean, what are you, 31, 32?
32. And I got to say, when I was first starting, the 32-year-olds sort of made up like the bread and butter of a team. And nowadays, they seem to be pretty few and far between. We sort of look at each other and like, dude, who's going to be last man standing?
Yeah, a bit that way, isn't it? I mean, but it has been an amazing change. I'd love to hear your reflection on that and what's happened. Where so many of these youngsters are really not serving apprenticeships anymore. They're straight in to the pointy end of GC and the biggest races.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago was the first time I really saw it. This young rider, Steph Kras, stepped into Katusha. He'd never been in a world tour before, and I think he'd even only done one race that season, and probably DNF'd. It wasn't a good result. And then he comes to the Volta Catalunya, and the first meeting is, okay, so we're riding for Steph at this race. And I sort of looked around like,
what?
Like, I've not seen this before. Like when I first started, and I'm not talking like that was ages ago. We're only talking 10 years. A lot changes in that. The first year was told at their first race, right, mate, you are getting bottles for everybody. You're going to be taking our clothes back and forth, and you're going to learn how to do this bike race, and you're going to watch how a team rides. And then when we see you doing that, we'll let you in with a few harder jobs. But now it's sort of just like this, okay, this kid was 7th at the Tour de l'Avenir. He was 9th at World Championships. And we basically expect that within 2 years, he's going to win a Tour de France stage. And it's genuinely the kind of talk that I'm hearing now. It's just crazy.
And is there less? I've seen a bit more murmurs about there's less respect in the peloton as well.
Man, I don't want to sound like a softie or anything, but yeah, it's like, I don't think the peloton's, in my experience anyway, I don't think the peloton's ever been this dangerous. It's just, for what I think it's worth, if you see a team coming through and you know that they've got Greg Van Avermaet on the wheel, you kind of give them a little bit of respect, even for the people working for Greg, because you're thinking, well, that's going to be one of the major movers and shakers of this race, and racing is about having the right guys in the final. It's not saying everyone's not doing their best, but we also got to be realistic at the end of a 250K classic. Who's going to be there? Who's got the legs? But now even Greg Van Avermaet can't get through unless he puts up a big fight. And not saying it's a good or a bad thing. It's just an observation. But cycling's definitely changed, especially in the last 2-3 years. I think it for me feels like a whole different sport. And I think this is where the older guys are actually having trouble, is that if we don't adapt, we kind of die. And, if we rest on our laurels, we just rust. And that's where guys are actually, I think, finding themselves more in trouble than not. It's not that the fact that it's our age or that we can't physically do things. It's that we're stuck in where cycling was in 2015. And these new guys have come in and actually created a whole new different version of the World Tour.
I was talking to Iffy off air before, and you tweeted recently about the return of Fabio Jakobsen. Obviously, that was quite a traumatic incident for not just people that were there, but I think the entire sport. How much of a defining moment do you think that was, in that incident, for the sport actually saying, right, enough's enough, in terms of just the basics around safety and really the education to what needs to happen?
I don't know, man. My fear is that it's going to be like one of these school shootings in the US. We always think when we see that, okay, all right, this is the end of guns in America. They're going to make some changes. And then, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of hoo-ha, and maybe there's one little restriction made. But I was thinking things are moving really in the right direction. Like, if you see at the Flanders Classics now, we've got these plastic barriers with no feet that are super well connected. And you've got these traffic island lights now that make noise, and the padding that they're putting around the races in these Belgian races really is this, like, it's world class, and it should be the standard. And I get excited and I start thinking that we've taken 10 steps forward. Like, I would say a Newtonian leap in safety and cycling. So first of all, hats off to the Flanders Classics. Like, thank you. Every rider feels so much better about it, and we really appreciate it. But then all of a sudden I see that race in Turkey, and the crash at 100 meters, they don't even have plastic guards on the fence. It's just a flag. So, where are the poor riders going to go? They're just going into metal bars with metal feet. And, that that would sort of seem to make sense to me if there were barriers at 2Ks, 3Ks to go that just had flags on it with sponsorship. But, in the last 150 meters, if you don't have plastic boards, what do they think is going to happen when we hit it? It can turn on from being something where we kind of scrape the barrier and push through, or if it doesn't have a plastic board on it, of course we're going to crash, and of course there's going to be a massive pileup, and then guys are going to go to hospital, and it's just not really what we sign up to do. I think that crash really messed me up, the one behind Groenewegen and Jacobsen. Like it honestly took me quite a while to get back into finals and actually be thinking about a result as much of just having your hands constantly on the brakes, ready to stop. When I saw Jacobsen lying on the ground, like it definitely was somebody who I thought had passed away. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I'm actually really, really close with the two doctors that were on scene, Doug van Islander and Dirk Tenner. And Dirk Tenner is like an emergency surgeon. So he had to perform a few things that he said he's never had to do outside of an operating room in his life. And Dag as well, an incredible doctor, was just saying that, they had to pull out every trick in the book. And even then they just got lucky. So, when you hear these kind of stories, you start to realize just how heavy the whole, the risk is that we take. We know that there's risk, right? And there's risk in everything we do. I think sometimes walking around Melbourne with the trams, that seems pretty dangerous to me. But when it comes down to something as simple as, I'm a rider, so, I think organizing races and organizing barriers seems simple. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a lot harder than I think it is, but it's it's certainly something that we all get really just frustrated seeing. And then when you have to have a photo like Jacobsen showing more class than anyone in cycling ever, going up to the poor kid from the African Wildlife Foundation team. Sorry, I've forgotten his name already, but you see so much class on a guy like that, but at the same time, I was almost heartbroken that Jacobsen had to see almost a little bit of history repeating. And I'm sure that he's been making great strides in his confidence all week coming back. And I'm sure in a big way that kind of set him back again, seeing that.
It's interesting hearing your reflections on all of that, Nathan, especially the 10 steps forward with what they're doing at the Flanders Classics. And look, it's going to take a while. Races all around the world, they're not all going to have the budgets to be able to implement, as good a finish. And I actually feel for Groenewegen a little bit in that his was a move that sprinters do. I mean, okay, maybe a fraction over the top. The biggest problem wasn't Groenewegen's move. It was the lack of barricades. I mean, there wasn't even a barricade where Jacobsen went through. He crashed through because there wasn't one there, and straight into the other infrastructure. I mean, it was just really on a downhill section, which was enticing even higher speed than normal. You're doing probably an extra 10k an hour. I mean, it was all of the.
We put on 58 chain rings that morning because we know the final.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And we're just talking about, just this morning as I was driving along, we're talking about, I was talking to Timmy Decker, and they were heading out to Castor to, where there's a bike race. There'd been a training camp with the trackies, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure you'll be on the honour roll at Castor. They used to have this great 50." I said, "Look, I can remember standing there watching the finish one time because I punctured, and Graham McVilly hooked Laurie Venn 50 metres to go into a parked car. There were no barricades. The barricades were the cars, and you went straight into a parked car. So you've come a long way since." 50 years ago.
Again, I'm sitting here in a pretty privileged position, knowing the cars of the old barriers.
Well, let's lighten the mood a bit. We'll go way back to the beginning. Obviously, we mentioned before the breakthrough Sun Tour victory back in 2011. You went on to win the Japan Cup that year, but can you take us through the moment that you knew you were going to make the step to the World Tour?
Well, it was actually funny. The day before the Sun Tour started, I'd been getting contacted a lot from Bernie Salzberger, who was on a team in the UK called Rally. And he was like, "Nathan, I reckon coming over across to Rally would be a great fit for you." I'm talking to the team. We'll see what we can do. We can see what we can do. And then the night before the Sun Tour actually started, I got a phone call from Cherie Prudhomme, who's actually now the first female sports director in the World Tour for Team Israel. And Cherie made me this great offer to come across to England to live in Derbyshire and race for them in the UK. So I was already thinking, in my opinion, that was kind of turning professional, you know, from NRS in Australia doing a few international races to all of a sudden thinking that I was going to be, you know, racing in Europe, which was always kind of my dream. I just didn't really know what that meant, but I knew I wanted it. And so then when I'm sort of pulling off this result in the race, I'm thinking, well, to be honest, I wasn't thinking too much, but then I got to the end of the race and I was like, shit, like I reckon there's a chance here that I actually might get, you know, a bigger team wanting to sign me. But at that point I'd actually agreed to being on Rally. So in my mind, I was like, oh, whatever happens, I'm riding for Rally because I want to be true to my word. And then to Cherie's credit, she gave me a phone call that night. She's like, hey, Nathan, that was amazing. That was so cool. And I was like, yeah, you know, I didn't expect to win. I always wanted to, but I didn't expect to. And then she's like, well, just so you know, I already expect that you're going to find a bigger team. And if you do, feel free to go. I'm not going to hold you to it. So it was really after that phone call is when my mind switched to, wow, maybe I actually could be on a bigger team. And then quite a few World Tour offers came in basically the next day. And then when I went and won Japan Cup, then quite a few more ended up coming in. And
So had you signed before the Japan Cup win, or you held out?
Well, there was only a couple of days, really. I think it was less than a week. So I was sort of in conversation with teams, and then I went and won the Japan Cup. And then, you know, I didn't really know how the contract thing worked at that point. So, you know, I was just sort of listening to the different teams telling me what they were going to offer and what they wanted. And then I was just, next thing I was on a plane to Japan because, you know, you go 3 days before the race. And then I won the race. And then all of a sudden they were coming on with a little bit more pressure for me to sign with them. And actually, I went to the team that gave me the lowest offer of all. Some of the teams were offering 2-3 times the amount of money that Garmin was. And they're all saying, okay, so you'll either do the Giro or the Vuelta. And yeah, I think we've got this plan for you where we're going to put you in all these big races. And I'm sitting there going, holy shit. Like, I've never even raced a bike in Europe. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? The fucking Giro? Yeah. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't swear on live here, but that's how I was thinking. Mate. That's fine. That's how we roll. Yeah. I was just thinking, this is insane. And then speaking with Alan Piper, and he's like, look, mate, I think you're good, but you're bloody green. You're bloody green. We're going to put you in the smallest races to start with, and we're going to dip your toe for 1 week in a World Tour race, and then we're going to take you out for a couple of months. And for sure, we won't put you into a Grand Tour, and we're going to put you over in the races in America, like California, Utah, Colorado, where the roads are big. You can actually learn how to race as a World Tour rider before coming in and just getting your head kicked in. And yeah, they offered me the lowest money out of all the teams. And then in the end, I was like, well, you know what? That actually seems like the most sensical offer. And I just at that point, I had a great respect for Piper, but I also just got like a really good, feeling from him, and I sort of trusted him straight away.
He's a ripper, Alan Piper.
I was going to say, did you have a manager at that time to help you through that? And of course, you're in the team with Andrew Christie Johnson, who's a legend and has helped a lot of people take that first step. So first, did you have an actual manager, and how much did Andrew Christie Johnson have to do with helping you get those contracts?
He was my manager, and not in the sense that we had signed or anything, but I think for everyone that comes out of that team, he is gospel. You know, you don't turn to anyone else for much advice, because, you know, at that point, Andrew had never led any of us astray, and he'd all put us in these situations that we'd only dreamed of. So, you know, and Andrew would never take a cent from anyone. You know, he puts his money into the sport. He's not in it to take it out. So, you know, that's another part with Andrew that you can just trust, is that the only things in it for him is his heart. And he was not surprised that I took the team that offered the least amount of money, and I think he was very much with me in that Garmin was going to be the best team, and the other thing is that Steele had signed for their continental team for 6 months, knowing that he was doing the stagiaire and stepping up to World Tour the year after. So I think Andrew was also pretty happy to see me and Steele in the same organization.
Hey, just on your win in the Japan Cup, I went and did that in 2012 and just loved the race for the fans. They are fanatical. I mean, what did they do on the back of it? Did you have like a cult following? Did they make you little stickers? Like, what did they do?
Man, honestly, it's insane. So then I won it again in 2014, and then
I got a photo of that. I think
it was just insane. Like I don't even know what to think now. I was walking into the hotel, and they're taking photos of my partner Laura, and then the next day they're like, Mrs. Haas, Mrs. Haas, Mrs. Haas. It's like, what is going on? Like this, it was mad, and just the amount of gifts that you get given to your room. People come up to your room and they give you gifts and they give you photos of you with them, 4 years ago at the last victory, and you're like, I mean, this is just odd, but I think easily and safe to say, and this is nothing on your crowds down at Bakerits here, John, but the Japan Cup crowd is the best in the world, and I don't even know if they really know what's going on in the race. They're just there having the best time on the side of the road. They're just dressed up. They're wearing the craziest things. And I think one thing I'll say about Japanese fans is that I feel like they genuinely love the character behind the athlete more than they love the actual physical performance, because they don't just go up to the biggest rider in a team. They literally go to every, and they just absolutely love the fact that we're in their country racing a bike, and they make us feel so welcome, don't they, Jonesy?
Oh, it's phenomenal. And also it's a great opportunity to sell your kit. I mean, Wes Salzberger, I don't know how much money he made on that trip. In fact, I don't think we were welcome back because I think he ripped a few of them overpriced skin suits. But he had a whole bed of kit laid out, and everyone's like, no wonder where all the bloody racing caps went. I think he built up a stockpile of about 250. It was unbelievable. Yeah. Did you sell much of your kit at Tour of Japan, or?
A few times, I took some stuff or, sold my race jersey with a race number on it. But I was actually always more interested because it's the last race of the year. And a lot of the time, your teammates, it's quite a transient sport. You're not teammates with anyone for too long. So a lot of the guys that would go to Japan Cup were either there to try to win it, or they were normally there because they knew they weren't on the team for the next year. So we'd actually all go for drinks and, Japanese food almost straight after the race, and sort of let the good times roll for a few days before we went home.
Yeah, we went to a Japanese karaoke bar with Fumi Beppu, and some random guy was running across the street with a towel around his neck. And I said to him, I'd had a few sakis, and said, mate, where's the local karaoke bar? He ended up coming along with us. He was a professional karaoke singer. And halfway through the song, he jumped up on a table and he had these snap pants. He ripped them off and was wearing a leopard skin G-string. It was like one of the funniest nights of all time. Whenever I see Fumi Beppu at a race, I go, mate, you've been back to karaoke? He goes, no, I caught up with that guy. We kept in touch. He does functions for him now. He's like, yeah, awesome time. But hey, what I want to ask you as well is when you made that transition to Europe, we've spoken to a number of Aussie riders. How'd you go with like homesickness? And because it is a lot harder for Aussies to pack up everything and go join the cycling bubble in Europe. How did you find that transition?
Yeah, good question. I was actually quite lucky. I was living with a guy called Joe Lewis in Australia before I came over to Europe. And he was on Skype with a friend of his called George Bennett, and I'd never met him in my life. And Joe goes, oh, George, who are you living with next year? And he goes, yeah, I don't know. I want to live with someone, but I haven't organized it yet. And he goes, oi, Hassie, come here. He goes, George, this is Nathan. Nathan, this is George. You guys are going to live together next year. I was like, right, cool. And that's George and I living in an apartment in Girona together. And I think without him, it would have been really shit. he's just a great guy, and he sees the light in a lot of stuff, as you know. So, you know, when you were having all these problems with translation, or, you know, all of a sudden realizing that we actually hadn't paid that gas bill that we thought was automatic and things had turned off, you know, we're just having a laugh about it because that's the kind of character he is. So he made things a lot better. But, you know, when you hear a young Belgian after a race being like, oh, it's really tough, you know, things are really super hard, huh? These races are really shit. And you're sitting there after a crash and you're like, all right, I'm going home to an empty apartment with no food in the fridge, and I'm going to have to take these bandages off myself, clean it out, put new ones on, and then try to find a doctor in Girona that speaks English. And this kid's going home to his home where he still lives with mum, and he's probably going to have beer and sit there and have his washing done by his mum. You're like, yeah, mate, shit's really hard.
Yeah, the soup's cold, huh?
Hey, it's good. Then tomorrow we're going to have to ride the canals.
So, how's your Spanish or your different languages?
Well, I speak French fluently. I was sort of a military baby when I was young, and we went to some international schools that just spoke French. For my first sort of 7, 8 years of school, we're all in French.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of gave me a bit of a head start. Speaking, well, I won't say I speak Catalan, but Catalan is a lot of it is actually in French, or it's closer to French than Spanish. So, you know, I hear a lot of, well, when I first arrived, that helped somewhat. But yeah, you know, I've got a kind of working level of Catalan now, but definitely not as fluent as my French or English. But it's the funny thing is, compared to 10 years ago, the city now has become so Anglified. If I don't know if that's a word, but
that's really
So yeah, you know, all the cafes, all the restaurants, you know, they're either owned by cyclists now, or they speak English. And the younger generation in Spain here, you know, they all learn English in school. So as they come through and start working in shops, it's English, and we kind of all know which banks have English bank managers and which osteos to go to, you know, which medical centers you go to after a crash where they have English translators, or the doctors speak English. So it's become almost hard to speak Spanish now, you know, in certain fields of life, just because the area has become so attuned and accustomed to well, I guess you could call it the business of keeping cyclists on the road. It's definitely is good business here to speak English.
Yeah, I really struggled to learn Spanish when I was there, mainly because I just couldn't be stuffed. But I mean, the thing with Girona is like anything goes. Like, I think the last proper catch up we had, we let go about €400 fireworks with Steel von Hoff at the top of that old mountain, and we almost burnt the joint down. We just let them go into the villages. But I mean, things like the fire festival, and that was just one day where you can buy fireworks, and these are proper blow your leg off if they,
mate,
they don't eject.
Yeah, skyrockets. Like there's a kilo of some explosive on a stick, and the stick is flimsy. You know, you're just thinking like, this is not safe. I shouldn't be doing this.
No. But do you
Happy's leg off in that video you did, didn't you?
Yeah. Bewley, if he didn't move, he was sitting on the park bench, and if he didn't move, it would have been hard to explain to management, I've just blown Bewley's legs off. But you know, it was an accident. It was for a video.
It was worth it.
Yeah. Think of the publicity, Jared. But do you enjoy Girona more so now with the influx, or do you think it was at its peak, you know, in those sort of 2012 to 2015 days when it was sort of still a bit of a hidden gem?
Well, since 2015, I've been living up in Andorra mostly. So Girona's sort of my, you know, second place over here now. It's sort of where I go in between races when I don't have too many days, or if the weather's bad up on the top. But that's sort of part of why, you know, I prefer spending time up in Andorra. Is it's just changed so much now, and the cyclotourism has, in a good way, but you know, just in some other challenging ways, it's definitely taken over the city, and having a coffee sometimes without having a conversation is quite a hard thing. Sometimes you just want to be an introvert and, start your morning and head off on a bike ride without having someone ask you to come along. But that's also a nice thing too. It's nice that the cycling world has sort of made Girona this big bubble and community. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But it's changed a lot, mate.
So where are you now? Are you in Girona?
I'm just in Girona. I'm just here for a couple of days. It doesn't look like the weather's good here either. I'm just looking out the window. It looks like it. I think it looks like a bit of a toilet all over Europe right now.
What's your next race?
So the team's giving me 3 weeks to kind of get my shit together now. Now that we know I'm actually healthy and not feeling like a broken unit, I'll have to go get some endurance again, and then I'll be coming back with the Tour of Dunkirk, and then Trobro-Lyon, which is the kind of gravel race in France, where you win. Actually, the winner wins a small piglet, like a live piglet. So
really,
I'm kind of aiming for that.
Look, we've had you for, we're almost pushing now, and you've probably got things on. But
I actually do have to head off, guy. I would love to stay for longer, but I actually got to get my day.
I do have to ask you one question, mate. It's a question I ask everyone. There's two things, but the Bay Crits. Now you brought it up, not me.
Right, here we go.
Nathan was a very much not just a part of the Bay Crits. He rode many of them, but he used to go out of his way to bring a whole team over with him. And actually, the last Bay Crits we had, his mate Marco Heller won it, yeah. And he rode well the other week. And I was listening to the commentary, and they were talking about his great win in the Bay Crits. And I thought, well, there you go. Yeah,
there we are. So, we put you on the stage.
So we're going to have you back next year. We're hoping the Bay Crits are going to be back. Are you going to be back for the Bay Crits, mate?
Well, if I don't make it back, it'll. I'm already running on 2 years without seeing my family or my country. So I think there's Buckley's chance in hell that I won't be back in Australia. And if I'm back, there is zero chance I won't be at the Bay Crits. I'll be there, mate.
Yeah.
Now, last one before you go, Hussey. You've obviously gone through highs, lows, setbacks. We often ask this question to our guests. What advice can you pass on to people that have experienced, tough periods, how to climb back up the mountain again?
Well, in the short but very wise words of Ryder Hejjedal, just keep grinding, bro.
Good finish, mate. Well, all the best. Hope you're back on the mend, fully recovered, and you resemble something like your Wikipedia photo, mate. Because that is one of the most polished Wikipedia photos I've seen of any pro athlete, mate. You should be very, very proud.
That's my Wikipedia page. That's brilliant.
We thought you must have doctored it, mate. And say hello to the lovely Laura for me.
I will, mate. I will.
All
Great
right.
to see you guys.
Good on you, mate. Take
mate.
it easy.
Cool.
See you, bud.
Yeah. That's Nathan Haas. Very interesting interview. He's a great storyteller. And, we had some great memories back in Girona back in the day. And as we mentioned before, that night where they allow you to buy fireworks, that was crazy. Because, as I said, anything goes over in Spain. It's insane. Iffy, anything you want to add before we wrap things up?
Oh, look, I'm looking forward to what's coming up. We've got Flèche-Wallonne on the weekend, the ladies and the men. It's a wonderful race, very tough. And then, into, I think it's Amstel first, Amstel this weekend, and then Flèche-Wallonne and into Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So looking forward to the great Ardennes Classic. They're the tough men of the classics. It's where the GT riders actually can often do something against the classic specialists. So I love these races.
All right. And as I always say, make sure that you like, share, subscribe the channel. That's obviously youtube.com/the Detour podcast. And tell all your mates. And my phone's going off now. I thought I'd put that on silent. But anyway, it was a great episode. And we'll see you again soon on the Detour Live.
This is the winning ride of the Tour de France.